Everybody, it's Annette from the Art of Intuition, and today we are going to talk about worrying and when do you stop worrying and what kind of bridges that gap from when that is no longer something you partake in anymore, as which is so drastically different from our human consciousness where we spend so much time worrying. But you do find, or you will find, if you're not there yet, that there is a shift that takes place. And all of a sudden, you stop that. I don't even really want to call it an emotion. I don't really feel like worrying is an emotion to me. It's more of a state of control, because you're so concerned about the outcomes. And you want to control the outcome. I mean, that's basically what control is. Control is what we do when we fear something. If we don't fear an outcome, we don't want to control the outcome or steer the outcome away from that, right? In our human consciousness, we are riddled with fear. And because we are riddled with fear, we are riddled with control. And trying to control what we are afraid of, we are afraid of some timelines that are going to occur. So we worry. And the worrying drives us to do a lot of things that manipulate the timelines, which I say manipulate the timelines because technically we can't as humans. We don't have the consciousness to shift the timeline really. All we can do is prolong the timeline. I think I said in a video before that you might have an idea based on when timelines are winding down. And, so usually I would say every linear year to me has a cadence. But by the summer solstice, I can start to see things that have to clear before fall equinox, because 2025 templates start to come in and you starting to shift really into 2025 things by October of that year. But for me, by around September, October of the year before. You might not get boots on the ground actually doing anything until maybe March or April of the next year, by the time you get to the spring equinox. But you will see where you're going. You will see the shift and you're going to understand what you're supposed to be doing. In between that time, between fall and spring during that time frame, you're going to start to see it. You're going to start to kind of map it out. Now, one thing human consciousness we don't have, even though I'm always going to say whether you consciously know or not, you do get ideas of what's happening. But as our human consciousness, a lot of these things we see in our dream state, and we poo-poo them and we don't pay attention to them because we don't feel like that's an important state. It doesn't matter. That's just my dream state. It doesn't matter. So we immediately shut that down as having any relevance to what's going on in our life. And it has so much relevance that as we ascend our consciousness and then we start to bring up our body consciousness, we start to understand how important that world is. That is our first connection to our other dimensional selves. It's our first connection to the timeline. It's our first connection to the threads that are holding everything together, all the timelines together, and how we can shift between the two. Our human consciousness cannot shift between the timelines. What it tries to do, we try to manipulate ourselves. We try to manipulate people around us because we're trying to get to a certain match point. We're trying to get to a certain end game. We're trying to get to a certain act we want to happen. We want a certain conclusion to something. So we manipulate toward that. And in the meantime, we worry about whether we're going to get there. So you're either going to be the type of human consciousness where you just worried all the time but never actually acted on anything you worried about. You just sat there and stayed in a perpetual state of worrying. A nervous wreck is what, I don't know if they even still call it that, but back when I was growing up, that's what you called it. It was a nervous wreck. You're always nervous, worrying about everything, and everyone knew in our human consciousness, in our human realities, we knew people like that, worried about everything. It didn't matter what it was. It didn't matter if they could, even have any, I'm going to use the word control here, but it's kind of a loose, I'm going to use it kind of loosely. You had no control in this outcome. You were worried about what's happening with other people who you barely know, but you were worried because you didn't like something. You didn't like the way it was, you didn't like their journey. You didn't like how they were doing something. You didn't like how they were raising their kids, how they were, how they were cutting their lawn. I mean, it was just, we would worry about everything. And there were certain sections of that human consciousness that's everything, you worry about everything. Then you had another set, or you either fell into a different category. It's kind of like the categories we talked about where you either never said anything, you never spoke up, or you spoke up too much. And there were two ends of the spectrum for human consciousness. And when we get into ascension, you have to learn to do the opposite of what you did as a human. So if you never spoke up for yourself, you have to speak up. If you spoke up all the time, you have to learn to shut up. And then eventually you balance it back out. What you're trying to do is trying to balance out the energy. You're trying to almost balance karmic scales there. You're trying to undo your human consciousness in a way. So to do that, you got to do the opposite. So that's why when people are going through their journey, you can't judge how people are doing it because they're going to be doing it how it's aligned for them to do it. And that might not have been how it was aligned for you to do it. You might have been someone who spoke up all the time and you had to be quiet, whereas someone else who never spoke up for themselves has to go over the top about speaking out. We go so far the other direction that we seem alien to our friends and our family because we're so different and we're going so far the other way. It's to balance everything out again. So we have to learn how to do that. And worrying is kind of the same thing. So you had the worrying all the time spectrum of the human consciousness, or the people, they just worried and did nothing. They just would sit and worry. Or you had the people that worried and then try to manipulate the outcome to ease their suffering and their worrying, So I'm going to worry about that. I don't want to have to worry about that. So in a way, they almost avoided worrying, but were worrying anyway. Worrying anyway, but tried to avoid it or end the worry by trying to manipulate and twist everything to what they wanted as an outcome. Now, worrying is a very pointless act, because we will learn, and like I said, if you're not there, you're going to be, that it is such a waste of time. Everything's predetermined, right? Every reality you've done, every position you played, for a sports analogy, every role you played, if you want a theater analogy, you've been every character in the book. You've done it all, and you're concurrently, because we don't really separate off the future or past. You're concurrently doing it all. That's why you start to drop judgment and when you get to certain aspects of ascension, because you realize, well, I've been that. I played out that role. That's why we seem to be always interested in every role somebody's playing, because there's a familiarity in that for us. Even if it's an outrage for us, there's an emotional chord. You can't hit an emotional chord with yourself if there's something there's an energetic alignment somewhere. Until you clear that alignment, or clear that signature, it's probably a better word, until you clear that energetic signature, you're still going to feel it's going to ring some kind of truth for you, no matter what you're watching on TV, no matter what it is. That's why we talked about certain times in our process where you can't really watch a lot of violent things, because you can feel how it affects your field and how it brings up a lot of stuff for you to clear. Other times you can watch that stuff and it doesn't bother you anymore. It's kind of watching sexual stuff's kind of the same way. There'll be times when you can watch it and it doesn't bother you. It doesn't, it doesn't cause any reaction. And other times you just feel like you can't watch it at all. You're trying to clear something around that and you don't want to see it. So there's always, everyone's going to be in a different phase. That's why when you see a lot of people going through energy reports and saying this is affecting everybody this way, well, no, it's not. It's affecting maybe them that way, and maybe some people around them that way, but it might not be affecting everybody that way. Because if you're still in just starting fifth dimensional phases and in bliss and magic, you're not feeling any of this, But if you're in a different set where you're watching your old realities collapse because you've grown past them, but you still don't know yet how to build new ones, you're in a whole different phase. And you're still in a worrying phase. When I was in the phase of everything old collapsing, all the human stuff collapsing and trying to build new, but not sure how to do it yet, that was a very strong time of worry. And worry really is doubt. Worry is not trusting. And, when we start to put it in those terms, we're not trusting the process when we're worrying. We don't believe in the process, which that's what happens to a lot of us during parts of the process because it doesn't go the way we think. So we start to worry. I'm doing it wrong. I fucked it up in some way. Everyone else seems okay and I'm not okay. How come my realities aren't panning out and everyone else seems fine? And then we start to do the comparison game, right? Well, they look okay, but it's not okay over here, but what's going on with me? So we have to get past that and really look at what's the core worry. And what's the worst thing that can happen with the worrying? What's the worrying really get you? Now, it can help you clear a lot of fear because worry, like I said, it's based in fear. Worry, control, fear. It's all the same chain. If we have nothing to fear, we don't try to control it. We're not trying to control it. We're not going to worry about it. We don't trust the process. We don't trust what's going on. So we create all these scenarios on our head. We worry about everything that could happen. And when we do that, we also then create all these offshoots. And that's why so many people ask that question, how come all these things keep happening? How am I creating all this stuff when I'm doing affirmations for this thing? Or I'm trying to really work on, I'm going to use the word manifesting. It is a very human word. It's a distorted word. Creation is a better word, but I'm going to use manifesting here just for the point of what we're talking about. If you're in your human consciousness, or even if you're in your awakening or transitioning into your ascension process from your awakening process, two very separate processes. Awakening is the gateway to the ascension process. You still can be worrying about certain things, right? And trying to control certain ideas, and you just don't know if you're doing it right. You don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And when we're in these phases and we start going down these roads and we're saying, how come it's not working? It's because we have a lot of, in these periods, and like I said, these periods can last for years. Anyone who tells you ascension is over in a year or 2 years, they haven't completed anything. They haven't completed the next part of the process. This can take decades. It can take 7 to 10 years if you're giving it everything you got. Much less if you have kids to raise, or you're still in some distorted relationships you're trying to clear, or there can be a lot of different things that can get in the way. Normally I'll see kids are the big one because we have human contracts to have them, and we have to fulfill that first. It has to do with bringing in children of higher consciousness later on down the road, that are going to play a part. It's almost like a prequel to the next phase of ascension for a lot of people. All these higher consciousness children coming in, that some people call rainbow children, they're just a different breed of children coming in, a different consciousness of kids starting out now from where we started out. They're more connected to begin with, and children are super connected. Let me put that a different way. They're not losing the connection like we did. As children, you come in super connected. Then you start to lose it as you grow, right? Because of the human consciousness around you. And you get put in that box in a sense. You get boxed in. You start to feel the constraints and the beliefs start to form because of what's going on around you and of what's encoded in your DNA, the human part of your DNA. But as the consciousness on the planet raises, you find that these children are not being subjected to that like they were before, like we were. So they just kind of stay more connected. They don't really lose that connection. And a lot of kids or young adults go into ascension a lot quicker than we did before. So even though it might not feel like, you see a lot of people feel like that's a detour, or that's a detour if I'm going to have children, or I feel like it's now a detour because I had kids and now I can't focus on this all the time, my ascension process. There's a reason that was in your plan. There's a reason you agreed to that and chose that to bring these children in to then lead the way later. It's still a service to humanity. It's not, but it might not be as straightforward as going through your ascension process is. And it might delay it some because you can't concentrate on it full time. Anyone who has kids understands what I'm saying, and how, especially young children, and even older children to an extent, on how much time that takes away from the connection with yourself in a sense. Now, there's another part of that where the children come in, they can balance out relationships, they can sever relationships with spouses and that type of thing, because they show the imbalances. They kind of come in to right the wrongs in a sense. I don't really like right or wrong, but yeah, we're going to use it here. We're using a lot of words here we don't normally use. They can balance things out and show you the distortions of different relationships, to sever ties with certain relationships too. There's a lot of reasons they're here. So I got a little off topic there, but so when you see someone acting like this is a year journey, it's not. It takes a long time to rewrite our human DNA. It takes a long time for us to learn, oh, let me build up a soul line reality. What does that mean? When I look about my financial systems, how does that work in soul line realities when your money is not for yourself anymore? It's for, what can I do for the collectives? What is this money's purpose? We start looking at the purpose of everything. How we get money changes. What we can do with it changes. What we support has to change. We kind of give away even from giving to big charities, and we start going more in the community, more of the personal touch in a sense, to make sure, we are seeing what we need to see, and not just trying to give money to something and we never actually have to see what we're trying to assist with, if that makes sense. So you will feel the need to, instead of just giving to a charity, maybe going and giving money to someone you see on the street that needs it, or talking to that person, or you feel yourself needing to go farther, and also busting through fear when you do that. So there's a lot of different things we're going to be doing. And when I talk about the biggest, when we go back, circle back around to the biggest worrying parts we have, is the biggest times we're going to worry is we don't think we're doing it right. We don't understand, because we haven't unlocked all the information yet. We only get a little bit at a time, because we can't be trusted with all of it. If any part of us is still acting from our human consciousness, we can't be trusted with anything. We will distort it, we will twist it, we will do everything we can to manipulate it. That's what our human consciousness does. That's what our human aspect does. It's the unconscious part of our soul. That's why we don't get a lot of money to build anything, because we wouldn't even know how to build it. If I had the money, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I wouldn't know what was soul aligned. I see so many people wanting to start soul aligned realities and bring money in through those endeavors, but it doesn't come in right away, and then they don't understand, why is it not working? This feels what I'm supposed to do. It could very well be part of what you're supposed to do. Usually we do a lot of different things. It's not like the human reality where we did one thing. We do a lot of different things. But can you really be trusted with the money? Or are you going to just go, oh, I'm just going to go I'm going to go invest it all back in me, and not really look at what's the purpose of this money? It still might be you need to move to a different house. It still might be all those things. But you see the grander purpose why, and you're not acting as your human consciousness is. So after a while, we go through a lot of iterations of mistrusting and the worrying, and getting through all of that, that action of the worrying, and why isn't this working? What is everyone else going to think? What have I thrown I've thrown my whole human life away to build something new, and I don't look like I have anything to show for it, because for so many years it's the internal building we're doing. Because in the beginning, I don't even know if I even finished this thought, but when we're trying to manifest certain things, like I said, I'm going to use that word again, but it's not my favorite word. We're doing the affirmations, we're doing all this stuff, and we're saying all these things, but our frequency's saying something else. So we're getting this mosh posh of stuff, and we don't understand why all these realities are coming at us. We can't see the whole reason. We can't see the whole plan. And until we can start to see more and more and more, we realize worrying really is a waste of time. Because what's going to happen is going to happen. It's already happened. The highest line reality is going to happen, whether we delay it, we try to manipulate it, we try to just draw out an old timeline because we don't want to let the other one go. Eventually it will happen. I think I said in a video before, your universe will not leave you in a reality that you have outgrown. It will not happen. It will not leave you there. It will move you on. And if we're rejecting the moving on part, then it will collapse on top of us. And that's what our human doesn't like. We don't like the collapse on top of us part. So why does it have to collapse on top of us? Why couldn't it end? It could end easier, but we didn't want it to end. So we rode that wave all the way to the end. And like sometimes we can. Sometimes we can kind of make that agreement with our universe and say, okay, which is really just higher aspects of yourself you're talking to, and go, okay, I'll ride this to the end. But when it's done, I'm not going to try to hold on to it. The organic conclusion is here. I'm not going to try to spread it out. I'm not going to kind of stretch it out because I'm afraid and worrying about the next step. You start to stop the worrying when you've gone through enough of these realities where you know there will always be another step. There will always be something that comes in. It will never be where you think it's going to come from. It won't come from the person you think it's going to come from. But it will be something there for you to go on to the next timeline, to move forward in your process. It will not keep you somewhere where it's stifling your process. It cannot happen energetically. On a frequency level, it will not happen. You will always move on. You will always keep going. Now, it can take 2.5 years to clear a certain timeline. And sometimes that's the minimum. I don't know if I've gotten through any of them beyond kind of shy of 2.5 to 3 years, because it takes that long. Now, every year you might see shifts in it. I've been in this one now about 19 months, and I have seen shifts coming forward, and you see how it shifts and changes and moves, because you are shifting and changing and moving, and your reality, you're still not so, you're able to create the surroundings, different things are changing, different relationships are shifting for you, and you can still kind of keep the whole thing together. That whole, if you look at it as almost like a bubble around you of the reality you're seeing and you're playing in at the time, you can kind of move the balls around, move everything around a little bit. But you're still not, your frequency hasn't gotten to the point where it can't be there anymore. You can change it to adjust, and that's what's happening in that period. That we have a 3-year process, we have 7-year process, we have 10-year, we have 11-year, we have 22-year processes. If you look back in your human experience, you'll see that pattern. So when we're looking at it and saying, well, I can see the shifts, I can see my reality start to change a little bit here, a little bit there, I can adjust it a little bit, right? I can do certain things. Certain people are adjusting a little bit to make this more comfortable. It's more of an ease now with this person where it wasn't before, because certain people have a little more give. Because we have a little more give. Our frequency's higher, making their frequency higher. They might have moments when they're clearing a lot, but you also might notice they have a different set point than they used to have. When they come back down to just their normal, not clearing anymore, they've raised enough in frequency because your frequency's higher now, and that affects their frequency. They're a little bit easier to get along with. So there's a lot of kind of little micro shifts before the major shifts start to happen and the major realities start to tear down. And when I say the major ones, like where you live, what you're doing, who's actually around you on the day-to-day. Those to me are the major shifts you'll see. Where you're living, the state you're living in, the continent you're living on. You can see these minor tweaks going through maybe that 2 to 3 year period where you see it shifting, gets a little bit easier to be in it, but you can still feel that it's not quite aligned anymore. You can shift it, you can tweak it, but then after a while, I can't tweak it anymore. I've kind of retrofitted as much as I can, and now the whole thing, my frequency is going to get so high, the whole thing has to go. The worrying stops when you trust the process. And the only way to trust the process, if I'm completely honest, you just have to go through enough of the collapses and to watch how the aftermath of the collapses come in. Even if you close the timeline out before then. And as humans, we wait for the next thing to come before we want to close anything out. We want to make sure we got something else lined up before we close it out, right? Human nature. It's human nature. We don't want to leave it until we see the next thing. It's different in soul line realities. It's different in vibrational realities, because when you're focusing on the vibration of the realities, you can't have this here and have this come in, because there's separate timelines, separate frequencies. You have to let this one go before the other one can come in. And it can still take 4, 5, 6 months to a year for the other one to come in. But you can't hold on to this one. They can't exist in the same timeline. They can't exist together. And that's why I see a lot of people trying to hold on to everything here. Well, I want it, but I want all this awesome stuff too. It cannot work that way. It does not work that way. I tried to do it for years. Trust me. I know. It does not work that way. You can't hold on to that old stuff. You can't hold on to the older frequencies. The stuff you know you got to let go of and get the new ones too. You have to let it go. You have to stop the worrying or go through the worry and just keep going. Let the worry follow you for a while. Take it with you as you keep marching on. Because they can't exist together. And if you get some mosh posh of them existing together, it's not going to be what you thought, because it's the frequency's not right. Even if you say, oh, I wanted this, and oh, that came in, but I still had all this right here, and I tried to mosh it all together, but it's not working. It's not what I thought it would be. It's because the frequency shifted now. How you dreamed it, how you saw it, was a different frequency than how now it's had to be bastardized in a sense, because you're trying to make it fit into something else, and it's not made to fit into something else. So that is the reason why we can get so many, even after we've gone through a couple years of this ascension, still get these very distorted things happening and things not coming in, and we don't understand why. Sometimes you have to ask the question, what's holding it back? The answer is us. Spoiler alert, the answer is us. But what are we doing? What am I holding on to? You know, I'll always say, sometimes it's the other person's not ready either, or the other person you're going to create that reality was not ready. You know, so reality is kind of not ready to go yet, in a sense. There might be a delay on another end. But I always feel that there's connection, you know, we have a connection to that. So if it's a delay on that end, there's probably a delay on our end too. We're not ready to move into it because we don't really trust it's going to be there. We worry there's nothing after this one. I have so many people I talk to, and they will say, whoa, this is it. There's nothing after. There's no other reality. There's always another reality. It might not be one that's going to fulfill all our human wants in that moment, because we have it pictured a certain way, but there's always a way. There's always a way out. There's always a way. You know, we just might not like, you know, before if we would have jumped 6 months ago, in a sense, we might have had a better landing. And as we wait and contemplate and worry, the mattress we're going to land on gets a little bit thinner, and we start getting really pushed out the window a lot harder. And the landing's a lot rougher because we kind of held on, and now even this one's starting to crumble over here, and we haven't even really jumped to it yet. So really look at what's the worry about. You know, I can't remember where I think I was getting my car inspected. Maybe it was I think it was last year. And the guy inspecting my car said, he's like, wow, I've never seen, I was just outside, like, I don't know, I was talking to someone next to me while we were waiting. And he's like, I've never seen anyone, he said, that just so acts like you have no care in the world. And, you know, I was just like, well, I don't, in a sense. I mean, I have lots of clearing, don't get me wrong. But there are moments we get to where it's like, what is there to worry about? I mean, it's going to happen the way it's going to happen. If I know I'm following the guidance I have, there's nothing to, what are we going to care about, in a sense? What are we going to worry about? What are we trying to steer in one direction? Because we have this fixation, it has to go that way. It doesn't have to go that way. That's just the way we, for whatever reason, want it to go. And we have to look at, why do I want it to go that way? What's so wrong with all the other, you know, if we go to a plan A, and that's why we're trying to stir the reality, we're worrying so much if we can get to plan A. What about, you know, B through Z? What's so wrong with those? What's our hang up on those where we're so trying to stir it in one direction? Shutting out everything else. So, all right. I guess we'll end it here. Okay. Keep practicing the art of intuition.